Chronicle Vol presents The Rise of the Russian Empire. How Russia came to be, the story that shaped the world, the vast and enigmatic lands that would one day coalesce to form the powerful Russian nation, were, at the dawn of the first millennium AD, a sprawling mosaic of human communities, not yet united by a cohesive political or cultural thread. Primarily, they were inhabited by diverse East Slavic tribes, who spread across limitless plains, through dense, almost impenetrable forests, and along the banks of majestic rivers that served as both arteries of life and pathways for trade and conflict. The 9th century AD marked a period of relative tribal autonomy, where each small Slavic group, often separated by natural barriers and distinct customs, managed its own destiny. These communities were frequently engaged in territorial disputes that spanned generations and in alliances that proved as volatile as the seasons themselves. The absence of a strong central authority, unified leadership, or a cohesive defense system made the entire region dangerously vulnerable to predatory incursions from neighboring peoples. From the north came the bold and, at times, brutal Vikings, known locally as Varangians, in their longboats. From the south, the steppes disgorged hordes of nomadic warrior tribes, whose lives were shaped by cavalry and plunder. The lives of the East Slavs, the direct ancestors of modern Russians, Belarusians, and Ukrainians, were intrinsically tied to the land and its cycles. They lived in rudimentary villages, often fortified with simple palisades, and their subsistence primarily depended on agriculture that, while basic, was adapted to the harsh soils and climate. They cultivated grains like wheat, barley, and rye, along with legumes. Hunting in the abundant forests, fishing in rivers and lakes, and gathering wild berries and honey supplemented their diet. Their society was stratified but fluid, with tribal leaders, warriors, and a majority of peasants. Families were the fundamental social unit, and tribal loyalty was a paramount value. Their beliefs, a complex pagan pantheon, were deeply rooted in the observation and reverence of nature. They worshipped deities who personified the elemental forces. Perun, the god of thunder and war, akin to Thor. Velis, the god of cattle, wealth, and the underworld. Mokosh, the goddess of moist earth, fertility, and destiny. Rituals and sacrifices were performed to appease the gods and ensure good harvests, successful hunts, and protection from disease and enemies. Every forest, river, or hill possessed its own spirits, and the world was filled with omens and mysteries. Ancestral wisdom, passed down orally from generation to generation, shaped their understanding of the universe. As time progressed, nascent trade centers began to sprout along the intricate river networks that crisscrossed Eastern Europe. Rivers like the Dnieper, Volga, and Volkhov were not just sources of water, but true highways connecting the icy Baltic to the prosperous Black Sea, and from there to the opulent Byzantine Empire and the Muslim caliphates. These routes, known as the path from the Varangians to the Greeks, not only allowed for the exchange of valuable furs, wax, honey, and slaves, but also opened the doors to the arrival of ideas, technologies, and, crucially, cultural influences from more developed civilizations. The Slavs, though geographically isolated in many respects, did not live in a vacuum. In this landscape of tribal fragmentation and growing, yet still incipient, commercial interconnection, the arrival of the Varangians, or Norsemen of the East as they were known, in the 9th century, marked a decisive turning point. The oldest chronicles, such as the Primary Chronicle, also known as Tale of Bygone Years, narrate a legendary and controversial event. Amidst internal conflicts and anarchy among the Slavic tribes, the Chud, Slavs, Krivichi, and Ves, they supposedly sent envoys to the Varangians declaring, "Our land is vast and rich, but there is no order in it. Come and rule over us." This is the basis of the famous calling of the Varangians. The legendary figure of Rurik, a Varangian chieftain, is central to this narrative, credited with founding the first ruling dynasty in the East Slavic lands, settling in Novgorod around 862 AD. The establishment of the Varangians, led by Rurik and his successors like Oleg and Igor, in strategically vital centers such as Novgorod in the north and Kiev in the south, marked the beginning of a slow and gradual process of unification. Kiev, in particular, rapidly ascended as the primary center of power due to its privileged location along the Dnieper River, a vital artery of the trade route linking Scandinavia to Byzantium. The princes of Kiev, initially of Varangian origin and bearing Norse names, demonstrated a remarkable adaptability. Over a few generations, they and their courts gradually assimilated Slavic culture, adopting their customs, accepting the East Slavic language as their own, and eventually intermarrying with the local Slavic nobility. This process of Slavicization was fundamental to the legitimacy of their rule and to the formation of a hybrid identity that would be the basis of the future Kievan Rus. However, the consolidation of power did not occur without immense challenges and considerable bloodshed. The Slavic tribes, deeply rooted in centuries of local autonomy, did not passively accept Kiev's central authority. Rebellions were frequent, and the princes constantly had to reassert their dominance through military campaigns, imposition of tribute, and the establishment of garrisons. Oleg, Rurik's successor, is famous for aggressively expanding the territory under Kiev's rule, conquering neighboring cities and tribes, and even conducting daring expeditions against Constantinople, the Byzantine capital, forcing favorable trade treaties. Igor's son, Sviatoslav, was a warrior prince who spent most of his life campaigning, expanding Rus's borders, but neglecting internal administration. In addition to internal resistance, the constant threat from external invaders was a heavy burden. The Pechenegs, a confederation of Turkic nomadic tribes, were a persistent plague on the southern frontiers, conducting rapid and devastating raids, stealing livestock and enslaving people. Later, they would be replaced by the Polovtsi, or Cumans, another nomadic group that would continue to exert pressure. The need to defend the borders diverted vast resources and manpower, hindering more peaceful and concentrated development. The territory of Ruses was immense. Communications were precarious, relying mainly on horseback messengers or boats, and ethnic and cultural diversity made it difficult to impose uniform control and a cohesive identity. Administration was rudimentary, based on tribute collection and the local imposition of justice by the prince's representatives. Despite all these difficulties and the still embryonic nature of the state, the foundations of an East Slavic entity were being laid. Relative peace, though intermittent, allowed trade routes to flow more regularly, connecting north and south, east and west, bringing not only economic prosperity, but also a constant exchange of diverse cultural and religious influences. This openness to the outside world would be crucial for the future of Rus. The most transcendent and transformative moment for the formation of Kievan Rus, and by extension, for the emergence of the Russian nation, was the adoption of Orthodox Christianity, coming directly from the Byzantine Empire. Under the rule of Prince Vladimir the Great in the late 10th century, traditionally dated to 988 AD, this mass conversion represented much more than a mere change of faith. Chronicles narrate that Vladimir, seeking a state religion that would unite his diverse domains and legitimize him among European powers, sent envoys to study the great religions of the time: Islam, Judaism, Roman Catholicism, and Byzantine Orthodox Christianity. The ambassadors were said to have been profoundly impressed by the magnificence of Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, reporting that, "We did not know whether we were in heaven or on earth." The choice of Byzantine Christianity was not just a spiritual decision, but also a shrewd political and cultural maneuver. It aligned Ruses with the center of power and culture in Eastern Europe, guaranteeing alliances and access to a vast body of knowledge, art, and writing. Vladimir's conversion, followed by the mass baptism of his people in the Dnieper River, united the Slavic tribes under a single monotheistic faith, offering a new basis for national identity and irreversibly integrating them into the Byzantine cultural sphere. The introduction of the Cyrillic alphabet, ecclesiastical laws, and a rich artistic and architectural tradition transformed Slavic society. But while the seed of a nation was firmly planted and beginning to sprout under the sun of a new faith, the storms of destiny were already gathering menacingly on the horizon, ready to test its fragility and forge its character in unimaginable ways. Kiev's relative unity would be tested by internal succession conflicts and external pressure from new forces. What would be the next challenge the Slavic lands would face? And how would it shape not only their future, but the very fabric of their evolving soul? The path to becoming a nation would be long and paved with trials.
Subscribe to the Vault of Chronicles channel. Stories you've never heard, every day here.